Hello everybody, hope everybody's doing great today. Appreciate those of you watching this video. I hope you enjoy it. And today we'll be doing something a little different. I'm going to cover a documentary today called Muscles and Mayhem, the unauthorized story of the American Gladiators. And man, is that a mouthful. I'm just going to keep it short. This is a documentary about American Gladiators. And I don't know about those of you who be watching this video, but when I was a preteen, teenager, I really enjoyed American Gladiators. I love the competition, and I love the idea of you have these big old muscle people, like men and women, and then against your average day Joe or Jane, and in this big competition. I really loved it, seeing if your average day's people could, win these competitions and these events over these, godlike people, these very strong people. So I was really drawn into that, the David versus Goliath part of the show. And that's why it really drew me into watching American Gladiators when I was a kid. I loved it, and I loved the competition that it had. So let's get into this documentary. The documentary really covers heavily the first 3 seasons of the series, like how it began, and then how it began, and then like up to its pinnacle of success, and then it kind of glosses over how when the ratings started to fall and there's suspicion of why that happened, and then eventually when it eventually went off the air. That's basically covered in probably like the last half hour of the last episode, but for the most part it's very heavily centered around the first 3 seasons and the original Gladiators, which those are the ones that personally I remember the most. I was excited to hear about Gemini. He was like one of my favorite Gladiators, and he had Nitro and one other guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And then they also interviewed Blaze and Ice, and a couple other on the female side Gladiators. Overall, I think they had like probably about 6 or 7 Gladiators that they interviewed for this documentary, and they covered. But they all were like the original Gladiators, except for Tower. They have Tower in there, and he was kind of came like I believe he started coming in around season 2 or 3. Apologize for that. But he's in there too. So it really covered heavily like how this concept began, and it was basically started by a guy who seems like he was like an Elvis impersonator, and he just had the idea of American Gladiators, of this show about these muscle people in this competition, but that's about as far as he got with it. He had no idea like what kind of games they would participate in or anything like that. So when he went around trying to sell this concept to those who would be distributing it, it was really up to them to come up with these games. And so the documentary goes into how they came up with these games that they would play. They showed kind of some footage of the pilot series, and this let you know, man, like the pilot was like terrible. They had a game where somebody was jumping up and down on a temporine, and somebody was trying to pick up these styrofoam stuff, and that's how you got your points and stuff. Like the first games of the pilot were like horrible. So it talked about how that happened and how they had to like just come up with the total concept of new games and see what worked and stuff. And to cover like how they went to the convention to sell this idea to like TV networks to actually put it on there and stuff. And I really one thing I did remember, they talked about how the big competition for them at this convention was the rollerblade game. And I remember as a kid watching rollerblade. I think it came on like on Saturday nights, if I remember, like really late, like after Saturday night main event. It's a main event for wrestling, WWF, whatever you want to call it these days. But I do remember rollerblade actually being on TV there for a while, and I did enjoy that as a kid watching it. But they was talking about how that was their big competition to get, these networks to buy their stuff. So it was really interesting to see how this show developed and how it kind of really looked crappy, and how they were able to change it and modify it to be like the show that it came to be. and the stories of the gladiators, which it really concentrates a lot on, and like what they did before they joined the show, like the process. It covers like the process and how they chose the gladiators, and you know how at the beginning I talked like how it was a show against David and Goliath, but that wasn't the first concept of it. Concept of it. Sorry, can't speak. You know, all of the participants at the beginning in the pilot show in season 1 were just as big as the gladiators, and it felt like they didn't really work. So they wanted to do the David versus Goliath type of concept, which I think, like I said earlier, I think that was a perfect idea to go with that, because that really drew my attention. You know, seeing just your normal average Joe or Jane going up against these guys made the show more exciting, and you know, you really was invested in it, in the show. You know, hoping that these guys can conquer these, you know, these Goliath, these huge people. You know. So I think that was a very smart choice. And they also came up with like the games, how they came up with the games and how they changed the games to make them more better and stuff. And people kind of behind the scenes, they did a very good job of covering those people and why they made the decisions that they made. I feel like the documentary was very good. I don't feel like they really, I mean, it did kind of buff up our original Gladiators and the creators and stuff. So it is something like really that kind of hits on all the, doesn't really touch on very many of the flaws of the Gladiators as people and stuff, like in a negative light. I think that, well, actually think about it, did you cover kind of balance? You know, do you give them like very positive, but you also kind of get like the downsiders episode where it talks about them taking steroids and doing other drugs. And then it covers, and I didn't know this at the time, but I guess like there was a year, like right before or after season 3, I think it's after season 3, where the show went on the road to all these different cities and such. I didn't remember that, but I thought it was pretty cool. And they show like the footage, like how they acted on the bus and their experience doing that. I mean, you could tell that this game or this competition that they did really took a toll on these gladiators. After the show, you know, they showed this home video footage. Like they would have like big ice packs on their elbows and stuff, so you know they were really sore. And they kind of gave like the thoughts about it. You know, it seemed like they enjoyed it, but it was also something that really wore and tore down on them. And how it kind of seemed like the producers of the show, like the company, not so much the everyday producers that would see every day, but like the higher ups, you know, those over there in the faraway land and the office, how they didn't really care that much about the health of these gladiators. Like if they got hurt, they just figured, you know, they were replaceable. They talked about the Dark Ages, which was the pilot show, the first 12 episodes, and how, you know, a lot of injuries happened because they didn't really have like a medical staff. And some of the games that, you know, were already physical, but how they had them set up made them even more unsafe than what they were before. And kind of that feeling that they had that they were just, you know, somebody who could replace, you know, and that the company didn't really care that much about them, about their health and about them in general, you know, that, you know, if they got hurt, you know, they just would ship them out and ship somebody in to cover them, to replace them, I should say. And they really talked about how, one thing I do remember as a kid watching a season where like some of my favorite gladiators weren't there anymore, and they really gave it a reason behind that, like why they got replaced. And of course it was, you know, financial reasons. These guys they signed a contract not realizing that they would never get a pay raise, or, you know, at least that's how they made it sound like. Whether that's true or not, because we didn't get to hear the corporate side of the story, but, you know, in the contract, you know, they was made the same amount of money all the time. They didn't get any benefits from the toys they sold or anything like that, so they was wanting to reconstruct their contract so they could get money from merchandise that had their names on them. I wouldn't say their faces, because they even talked about how it was like every toy looked the same. but you know, their names are on there. You know, this should have got some kind of compensation for their for the toys, for the merchandise. In my humble opinion, you know, it's kind of weird because a lot of things that the when we were talking about the tour they went, you know, a lot of things that the Gladiators were bragging about, you know, how they were partying all the time and stuff, you know, they had a great time and stuff, but back in my head, it's like, you know, that's not really a good thing, you know, but it was nice to hear their stories and how they, you know, how they were able to endure and stuff. And it sounds like the Gladiators, all of them really enjoyed doing the show. They loved it, and it was just, to me, I liked it. I liked the documentary. I thought it was good. It was great hearing their stories. You know, seeing some of my favorite gladiators. You know, and seeing how they were doing after the show. You get a little peek into that. What they're doing these days. What they were, and it sounds like they're all doing pretty good. Sorry for the hesitation there. I was trying to figure out where I was wanting to go with that. But, you know, it sounds like they're all doing good now. For the most part, sounds like they're all having successful careers. I think listening to the documentary, I think my favorite gladiator was Blaze. You could just tell in the first episode that she was just like a sweet woman and stuff. And sounds like she married like their trainer. She married the trainer. He trained the participants, you know, so they could, you know, compete well, you know, train them how to joust and stuff like that. And he did a little training to the gladiators. And it was nice to hear the story of those two meeting together and stuff like that. And it was just a great little documentary. If you liked American Gladiators, if you like American Gladiators like I did, this is something you want to watch. Brings back the memories and stuff, and like how you know, they came up with the games and kind of more detail, like the behind the scenes stuff, and like all the stuff they had to do just to get this show on the air, and then how they were able to do the little adjustments to make it as popular as it was. It was great. Some things I wish they would have covered was like, because one reason I watched it was because of Larry Zonka. I'm a big football fan, you know. I mean, I never did watch Larry Zonka play at that time. You know, now thanks to YouTube, I can go and watch old football games. But, you know, I knew Larry Zonka, and just seeing the highlights, like he was a tough guy. And so part of the reason I first started was because he was like one of the announcers. Like, so I was kind of wondering how they were able to get Larry Zonka to be like one of the announcers, you know, how that came about. And it looked like in the pilot they had Fran Tarkenton as one announcer. So what happened to him? If probably Fran Tarkenton saw how bad the pilot was, he's probably like, I'm out of this. That's probably what happened there. But, you know, I think Larry Zonka was the better choice than Fran Tarkenton, because while Fran Tarkenton was a great quarterback, you know, he's not really known to be a tough guy like Larry Zonka. And plus, you got Zonka, you know, that name, you know, it fits into like the role of a gladiator, you know, it's tough. Anyways, enough about that. So yeah, so I'm going to recommend this. I might even highly recommend this, especially if you were an American Gladiator fan. This is definitely something to watch. You get to listen to your favorite gladiators speak and give their side of the story, how they became a gladiator, you know, their experiences on the show and what they're doing now. It's fantastic. I loved it. I think it was very well produced, very well produced, and you'll enjoy it. It's like 5 episodes, I believe, if I remember right, you know, and they're all about roughly 45 minutes, I think, maybe an hour, but it's a great watch. Check it out. You'll enjoy it. I hope everybody's having a great day, and I'll see you, or you'll see me. I won't see you because I can't see through this, but you'll see me next time. Adios.